Hello, everyone. Tonight's story is a gentle voyage into a world of longships, ocean mists, and quiet northern nights. If you've ever wondered how the fierce and fabled Vikings found rest in their harsh seafaring lives, then let this story be your lullaby. We'll explore not battles or raids, but something quieter: how they dreamed, how they slept, and how their nightly routines helped them find peace beneath the stars. So settle in, close your eyes, and let your thoughts drift like a boat on still water. And if you enjoy stories that help you relax, feel free to follow this channel. Tap the little bell so you'll be gently reminded when a new tale is ready for your evening rest. Now, let us set sail. The waves rolled gently beneath the Longship as it cut across the cold northern sea. It was late, and the sun had long since disappeared beyond the gray horizon, leaving behind a soft twilight glow that shimmered along the rippling water. The men aboard were quiet. No shouting, no clatter of weapons, no rush of oars. Just the wind sighing through the sail and the creak of old wood bending with the ocean's breath. Among these men was a young Viking named Eirik. He was not the strongest nor the loudest among his kin, but he was steady, and he was thoughtful. Eirik often found himself awake when others slept, listening to the world around him, the soft slosh of sea against hull, the flap of the sail, the distant cry of seabirds lost in mist. He would lie back against his fur-lined cloak, pull it close to his shoulders, and gaze up at the stars. Above, the sky was vast and clear, lit with constellations the old seers once whispered about in Longhouse Tales. Eirik traced the shape of the bear, the serpent, the ship, stories carved into the sky long before he was born. The sea smelled of salt and cold iron, and the air was filled with the scent of damp wood, brine, and smoke from the ship's little hearth, where a quiet fire burned in a shielded iron pot. The hearth, though small, was sacred. It gave warmth to fingers and food to bellies. At night, when the chill rolled over the sea like a ghost, the men would gather close to it, shoulder to shoulder, trading tales in low voices or sitting in comfortable silence. One by one, they would lean back and doze off, trusting the sea to keep them afloat and the stars to watch over them. Eirik had always wondered how the older men could sleep so easily here, on planks of wood, with only their cloaks and shields as pillows. Some had learned the trick of sleeping with one eye open. They joked, though the truth was simpler. They had learned to let the sea rock them, to breathe slowly with the rhythm of the waves, to find comfort in the nearness of others. Their beds were not beds as we know them. They were spaces between the benches, narrow strips of deck softened by straw mats and animal hides. Some slept under tarps or oilskin to keep dry. Others built small, tent-like shelters from canvas and oars, creating a kind of private nook where they could escape the wind. The boat was not large, but it carried with it everything they needed: food, water, fire, stories, and sleep. Tonight, Eirik listened to the soft murmur of one of the old men Gunnar muttering a prayer to the god Nerd, keeper of the sea. It was not loud or urgent, just a whisper, repeated every night before Gunnar closed his eyes. Eirik found comfort in it. The sea was a wild place, but the gods walked with them. He believed, and so did dreams. Some nights, when the waves were calm and the moonlight was kind, Eirik would dream of the forest where he was born, of tall trees and moss-covered stones. Other times, he dreamed of the shore ahead, of a warm fire in a hall, and a place to sleep that didn't sway beneath him. But most of all, he dreamed of the sea itself. In his dreams was a woman's voice, soft and singing, calling him to drift further, always further. Not all nights were calm. Sometimes the sky would open and pour down rain in heavy curtains. Thunder would roll across the sea like the voice of Thor himself, and the men would huddle together, wet and weary, their dreams scattered like gulls before a storm. But even then, they learned to rest. Wrapped in sealskin cloaks, they would close their eyes, feel the pitch and roll of the ship beneath them, and let exhaustion pull them under like a gentle tide. There were tricks to sleeping well on the ship. One was to eat something warm before resting dried fish boiled into a stew, or porridge cooked over the little hearth. Another was to tuck the ends of one's cloak beneath the body, keeping the warmth in. And if sleep would not come, one could always hum a lullaby low and slow. The kind mothers sang in villages far from the sea. Eirik's mother had sung such songs. He remembered her voice, soft as wool and steady as the tide. Even now, years since he'd left his home, that memory curled around him like a blanket. He whispered one of her songs now, barely audible, just for himself, and felt the tightness in his chest ease. He wasn't the only one awake. Further down the ship, Bjorn the carpenter snored softly beneath his fur hood, his hands still marked with pine resin. Next to him, little Leif, no more than 16, twitched in his sleep, chasing something in his dreams. Others lay curled around their packs, their weapons close but untouched, their faces soft in rest. Above them, the sail whispered. The stars wheeled slowly. The ship drifted forward, steady and sure. There was no rush, not tonight, no storm on the horizon, no landfall by morning. Just the gentle rhythm of sleep, shared by a crew that had long made peace with the sea's moods. Eirik turned onto his side, pulled his cloak tighter, and let his thoughts float. He imagined the gods watching from above, their hands guiding the stars. He imagined a world where the sea never ended, where sleep came easy and dreams were always kind. He smiled, just a little, and finally, like the rest, he let go. The Longship drifted on, a cradle beneath the moon. The morning light rose slowly across the sea, casting a pale gold shimmer on the waves and stirring the Longship from its night of peaceful drifting. But this part of the tale is not about the sun's rising. It is about what comes after that first rest, when the body wakes, but the spirit is still caught between sleep and waking. That soft in-between time where quiet lingers and the mind wanders slowly, still tucked in the dreams of the night before. The Longship rocked gently, just as it had done all night. The men aboard stirred one by one, stretching their limbs, blinking into the misty morning, rubbing sleep from their eyes, but not hurrying. There was no call to arms, no sudden alarm, no crashing waves, just the whisper of the sea and the scent of salted wood, smoke, and damp wool. Eirik sat up slowly, cloak still wrapped around his shoulders. His back ached a little from the hard deck beneath, but he had grown used to it. Everyone aboard had. Sleeping on a Longship was not about softness, but about rhythm, about knowing how to shift your body just so, letting the ship cradle you like a mother might cradle a child. A Viking learned the ship's breath, its sway, its creaks. In time, it became familiar, like the sound of a hearth crackling or a lullaby in the dark. Nearby, Leif was still asleep, his face buried in his arm, hair sticking out at odd angles like a haystack in the wind. Eirik smiled. The boy had struggled his first weeks aboard, waking often, groaning about cold feet or a stiff neck, or worse, falling into the sea, once while trying to stretch his legs at night. Now, Leif snored like a sailor twice his age, arms wrapped tightly around a leather satchel filled with wool, used as a makeshift pillow. Not far from them, Gunnar and the older warriors gathered by the small hearth, warming their hands and sharing bites of dried bread and salted meat. The air was thick with the smell of it, and smoke curled gently toward the sail above. They spoke little, their voices low and even, as if not to disturb whatever still lingered from the dream world. The fire crackled quietly, and the sea answered in kind with its own slow music. When the ship was at peace like this, the men often rested more than once a day. There was a kind of rhythm to their rest, broken up by watches and work, but always returning to quiet moments. Midday rest was as important as night sleep, and often, after a short meal, many would lie down again, cloaks over their eyes, listening to the voices of their companions as background music for drifting away. Eirik had come to love those midday sleeps. Not quite naps, not quite full slumber, just moments of surrender, when the sun warmed your face, the sea lulled your mind, and the sound of other men breathing nearby reminded you that you were safe. There was something beautiful about it, dozing beneath an open sky, trusting that the ship would carry you forward, that your brothers would stand watch, that the world could wait. Of course, not all parts of the ship were equal. The best sleeping spots were claimed early behind the mast, where the wind was softer, or beneath the lowered sail, where shade gave some comfort. Near the hearth, it was warmer, but also brighter and smokier. In bad weather, the men built canopies from oilskin and oars, creating shelter from the wind and rain. They would press close together like pups in a den, sharing body heat and silence. Privacy was rare, but that wasn't a problem. Vikings were used to sharing space. In the long houses of home, whole families slept in rows, shoulder to shoulder, beneath furs. On the ship, the arrangement was not much different. Shields were hung along the railings, bags and gear tucked beneath benches, weapons tied within reach. Everyone learned to move gently, to not disturb, to respect the sleeping hours, no matter how strange the timing. There were rules, unspoken but known. You did not step loudly near a sleeping comrade. You did not laugh too sharply, nor speak too loudly. When someone lay down, they were left to their rest unless danger or duty called. This was not just politeness, it was survival. A rested crew was a strong crew, and sleep was one of the few comforts the sea could not take. Even the ship itself seemed to understand. It would moan and creak, yes, but it rocked with a kind of lullaby rhythm, a sway that matched the breath of the sleepers. There were times Eirik could swear the boat was dreaming too, drifting on ancient waters, filled with ghost sails and moonlit fish, its wooden bones humming with old songs. Dreams came often on the sea, and they were strange. Perhaps it was the salt in the air, or the way the stars spun above, or the closeness of the gods. But men would wake and whisper of visions of walking through forests made of ice, or swimming in seas of fire, or meeting loved ones long dead on distant shores. Some said these were gifts from Odin, glimpses of other worlds. Others believed they were the mind's way of speaking truths the day would not hear. One dream had stayed with Eirik for weeks. In it, he walked along the spine of a giant whale, the stars above so close he could touch them. Each step echoed like thunder, and when he looked behind, the ship followed, its sail a ghost, its oars arms of light. He awoke with tears in his eyes, not from fear, but from the feeling that he had been somewhere real, somewhere sacred. He didn't speak of it to the others. Not all dreams were meant to be shared. As the day stretched onward, some men would rise again, others sleep a little longer. Eirik often sat by the prow during these hours, watching the sea stretch endlessly ahead. It calmed him. The act of watching, of doing nothing, of simply breathing with the waves, it was a kind of meditation, a kind of prayer. The sea taught patience, and patience taught peace. Occasionally, a seabird would circle above, its cry sharp in the soft air, or a pod of dolphins would swim alongside the hull, their sleek bodies breaking the surface in arcs of silver. The men would pause their tasks, smile, point. Moments like those stitched their lives together, reminded them they were not alone on these waters. And then, without warning, sleep would take someone again. A man leaning back to rest his eyes would be snoring within minutes. Another, sharpening his blade, would lay it aside and curl beneath a cloak. No shame in it, no fear. Just surrender to the body's needs, letting the ocean do the rocking, letting dreams rise like mist. As the light dimmed toward evening again, Eirik prepared his little sleeping place. He rolled up his cloak for a pillow, checked the leather tarp overhead for leaks, and placed a small carved figure beside him, a wooden wolf his sister had made him. He had carried it from village to village, from raid to resting place. At night, he kept it close, not as a charm, but as a memory, a thread to his home. The hearth was being stirred again, embers reignited for warmth and food. Low voices spoke of weather and stories of other voyages, but the mood remained soft. It had been a quiet day, a good day, and now sleep would return. The stars began to blink to life once more. The sky, still streaked with pale blue and amber, began to deepen into the rich indigo of night. One by one, the men settled into their places like pieces of a living puzzle, each knowing where to go, how to lie, how to fold themselves into sleep. The ship, as always, rocked gently, and the sea whispered songs only the dreaming could hear. The wind shifted. It came from the west now, softer than it had been in days, stirring the sail with a steady hand and brushing along the wooden edges of the Longship like a familiar breath. The sea rolled in long, slow waves, as if sighing in its sleep. The sky above was dark velvet, scattered with stars, and a sliver of moon that watched quietly over the ship as it glided forward. Eirik lay beneath his cloak, already halfway to sleep. His body had found the rhythm of the voyage long ago. He no longer tossed or turned, no longer woke at every groan of timber or flap of canvas. The sounds of the ship were like the sounds of a forest to a woodland creature known, natural, comforting. The low whistle of the wind, the water slapping softly at the hull, even the murmur of voices near the hearth were all part of a lullaby older than memory. That night the men spoke quietly, not of battles or ports, but of dreams. Bjorn, who rarely said more than 10 words in a day, leaned back against a coil of rope and told of a dream he'd had the night before. He was back in the forge where he'd learned his trade, but instead of hammering metal, he was shaping clouds. Each strike of his hammer sent a puff of white drifting into the sky, forming sheep and ships and great mountains. The others listened without mocking. Dreams were not a thing to laugh at out here. Leif said he dreamed of a mountain that breathed, its sides rising and falling like a sleeping giant. He climbed it and saw the sea stretch in all directions. When he looked up, he saw the stars arranged in runes, glowing gently, as if whispering something only the wind could hear. Gunnar nodded quietly and said that was an old story, passed down before even his grandfather's time. Sometimes stories lived in dreams, and sometimes dreams became stories. No one rushed to sleep. They let it come as it would, like a fog rolling in from the shore, gentle and slow. Some sat in silence, hands wrapped around warm bowls of broth, eyes heavy. Others wrapped themselves in furs and lay back, staring into the heavens as if waiting for a sign. The Longship rocked gently, as if the sea itself wanted them to rest. Eirik rolled onto his side, feeling the cool air brush his cheek. He had tucked his small carved wolf under his arm again, its wood worn smooth from years of holding. He listened as the ship whispered to itself, timbers sighing in the night, the ropes creaking gently with each sway. It was a language only the seafaring knew, full of quiet meanings and old truths. He watched as the stars slowly drifted across the sky. Here, on the open sea, there were no trees to block them, no smoke from hearths to dim their light. It was a sky unbroken and deep, full of ancient stories written in glimmers. The seers of old had read fortunes in those constellations, but for Eirik, they were simply companions, silent watchers in the dark. Above the ship, the sail swayed like a giant sleeping bird, rising and falling with the wind. It was patched and warm, but strong. Like the men beneath it, they were not kings or gods. They were sailors, dreamers, fathers, sons. Each had his own burdens, his own hopes, his own reasons for taking to the sea. But in sleep, those differences disappeared. They all became still, They all became quiet. A man near the stern snored, a deep, steady rhythm like a drum in the distance. Another muttered in his sleep, words too soft to catch. The fire had burned low, but it still glowed, casting faint light on weathered faces, on hands that had held blades and rode across kingdoms, now curled loosely at their sides. There was comfort in the closeness, in the knowledge that others were near. Even in sleep, they were never alone. Some men tied cords around their waists and fixed them to the benches, a small protection against rolling into the sea in their sleep. Others simply lay close to the center, trusting the sway of the boat. Eirik liked to rest near the prow, where the air was fresh and the sky seemed even closer. He thought of his father, who had once told him that the sea could steal your soul if you weren't careful. Not out of malice, but because it was vast and hungry and old. That was why you kept something of yourself close, a carving, a song, a name whispered before bed. It reminded the sea that you still belonged to the land. Eirik whispered his sister's name now, just once, and tucked the wolf a little tighter beneath his chin. The wind changed again, soft as breath, and the sail shifted. The ship rolled gently, not enough to wake the men, just enough to rock them deeper into their dreams. Sleep on the sea was not like sleep on land. It had no firm walls, no thatched roof. It was open and free, cradled only by sky and water, but it was real, and it was enough. The stars above turned slowly. The world turned with them. Somewhere nearby, a gull called out once, then was silent, and the Longship floated onward, through the night, through the dreams of men who no longer feared the dark, only listened to it, breathed with it, and let it carry them homeward. It was a night without a moon. The sea was a black mirror, stretching endlessly in all directions, reflecting nothing but the hush of the sky. Clouds drifted like forgotten sails overhead, and the stars blinked quietly behind them. Their light softened, scattered like sparks from a fading fire. The Longship moved without hurry. Its wooden hull slid across the water like a memory, ancient and slow. Every part of it was damp with sea breath, from the curved dragon-headed prow to the worn benches along its sides. The men upon it lay in stillness, their bodies wrapped in cloaks and wool and fur, their eyes closed, their hands relaxed. Sleep had come and wrapped them gently. Eirik had fallen asleep with his back against the prow, his knees drawn up, his hands tucked beneath his cloak. He had not meant to fall asleep. He had simply watched the sea, watched the stars, and then at some quiet point, he had let go. Now he stirred faintly, not fully awake, not fully dreaming. The cold nipped at his cheeks, but it was familiar. A kind of cold that didn't bite, only whispered. A kind of cold that belonged to the north. Beside him, the carved wolf figure rested, silent and smooth. Sleep on the ship was like that, half waking, half watching. There was always something alive in the quiet, something beneath the surface. It was not restless, nor was it fearful. It was awareness, gently cradled in calm. A creak of the mast, a soft thud of rope against wood, the occasional sigh from a sleeping man. All of it was part of the language of the ship, a language spoken only in darkness, where every sound had its place and every silence its weight. Even the sea seemed to sleep. No waves crashed tonight. The water simply breathed, lifting the ship and setting it down again in slow, even rhythm. It was a lullaby written without words, and the Longship, old and faithful, rocked to it without resistance. At the hearth, a small flame still flickered. It had been banked carefully, guarded with stones and care. Its light cast a gentle glow on the nearest faces, Bjorn's heavy brow, Leif's soft cheek, Gunnar's silver beard. They looked like statues carved by wind and fire, shaped by years of travel and nights like these. No one spoke. It was not a silence of emptiness, but of fullness, like the hush of snowfall, or the pause before a song begins. Eirik did not open his eyes. He didn't need to. He could feel the boat beneath him, feel the way it moved. He could tell by the scent of the air that no storm was coming. The salt was soft. The sky was calm. This night reminded him of something his mother once told him, that there is a kind of sleep only found far from home, a sleep that comes when the body is tired but the heart is still. She had called it sailor's peace, a rest that came from surrender, not safety. You gave yourself to the world around you, trusted it to hold you, and in return, it gave you dreams. He had not understood it then, but now, lying here beneath a sky too large to name, with nothing around him but sea and stars and the slow breath of other men, he did. Sailor's peace. The ship rocked again, a little deeper this time. The sail rustled like a bird settling its feathers. Eirik shifted slightly, letting his shoulder press into the wooden beam behind him. It was rough and warm from the day's sun. His cloak had fallen partly from his shoulder, so he pulled it back up, tucking it tightly around his neck. The carved wolf bumped gently against his ribs. He placed a hand on it and smiled, eyes still closed. From somewhere toward the stern, a voice hummed, just a thread of melody, low and slow. It was Gunnar. He often sang to himself at night, nothing loud, nothing meant for others. Old songs, half-remembered verses, the kind of songs that mothers once sang to children and old warriors whispered to the fire when they thought no one was listening. Tonight, it was a lullaby. No one joined in. No one needed to. The song drifted over the ship like fog, settling gently. It moved between the benches, curled around the sleeping men, folded itself into the folds of blankets and cloaks, and then, slowly, it faded. The sea continued its rhythm. Somewhere out there, perhaps far below, a whale called, deep and low. The sound barely reached the surface, but the ship felt it. Eirik felt it. A thrum beneath his ribs, a reminder of old life in deeper waters. He did not wake. He simply smiled again. Sleep returned, not just to Eirik, but to all of them. Like a tide, it came in waves. Some men stirred, rolled over, sighed. Some dreamed. Some simply drifted without thought, wrapped in the warmth of rest. Time meant little here. It passed not in hours, but in breaths. The stars wheeled slowly above. The sail shifted again. A whisper, a soft exhale. The longship rocked. The men slept. And the sea, as always, watched. There are nights when the sea is still as glass, and then there are nights when it weeps. Not in fury, not in storm, but in a quiet, steady drizzle, like the sky itself has grown tired and begun to cry gently over the open world. This was one of those nights. A hush blanketed the ship, not from silence, but from sound gentle, endless drops of rain tapping on sailcloth, trickling down the mast, whispering across the wooden deck, like the fingers of some ancient spirit. The rain had begun in the late evening, just as the sun vanished beneath a thickening curtain of clouds. No thunder, no wind, no drama, just a quiet change in the air. And then the first drops. One by one, the crew prepared for it. They moved slowly, with the ease of men long used to nature's moods. Oilskin cloaks were drawn up. Tarps were stretched between oars. The little hearth was banked and covered. And then they lay back down. Eirik loved nights like this. He didn't know why exactly. Maybe it was the sound of the rain, soft and patient, like a story being told by the sky. Maybe it was the way everything slowed down, how even thoughts came gentler, more carefully. Or maybe it was simply that, in the mist and the cool air, the world felt smaller, closer, more like a shelter than a void. His cloak, waxed against water, pulled up to his chin, and the carved wolf tucked safely inside. He lay flat on his back near the prow again. Tiny droplets, spattered against the edges of the tarp, stretched above him, forming a thin rhythm, a lullaby in a new language. He listened to it, not with ears alone, but with every part of himself. The men were quieter tonight, not just because of sleep, but because rain has a way of softening everything. Their movements were slower, their speech minimal, their rest deeper. It wasn't cold, not truly, but the dampness made everyone curl a little tighter, press a little closer, nestle their warmth into the deck as if it were earth. Bjorn had constructed a small lean-to near the mast, using spare shields as walls and sail scraps as a roof. He and Leif had crawled beneath it, laughing as they arranged their gear just so, creating a dry cocoon where they could sleep without the tickle of falling rain on their faces. At the stern, Gunnar sat quietly with his cloak hood pulled forward. His hands rested on his knees, his eyes half closed. He looked asleep, but Eirik knew better. The old man often sat like that for hours, listening to the rain, as if it were speaking directly to him. Perhaps it was. He claimed once that Njord, god of the sea, spoke through water, not the crashing kind, but the gentle kind. Rain, mist, tide. The soft water, not the loud. Tonight felt like a god's whisper. The wood of the ship had darkened with wet, its grain drinking in the moisture, its creak subdued by the damp. Eirik felt it beneath him, not soggy, just softened. The sharp edges of the world were rounded here. Everything seemed slower, quieter, older. He turned his head slightly, looking down the length of the ship. Men curled under fur and hide, some using their packs as pillows, others laying their heads on folded cloaks. Their faces were still, mouths slack with sleep, brows relaxed. Even the younger ones, so often restless, had stilled. There was no tossing tonight, no sighing, just breathing, slow and steady. The rain had soothed them. It was strange, Eirik thought, how the hardest men could be calmed by something as soft as rain. These were warriors, rowers, hunters' men who had held swords, who had shouted in battle, who had faced storms that tore sails in half. And yet here they were, hushed by a drizzle, quieted like children beneath a woolen roof. He liked that. He liked knowing that even strength needed peace, that even rough hands needed stillness. The sea rocked them gently. It had taken years, but now Eirik barely noticed the movement. The boat swayed, yes, but it was no longer a thing he noticed. It was simply part of him, like breathing, like blinking. The rhythm of the ocean had become the rhythm of his blood. He adjusted his position slightly, letting one arm curl beneath his head. The carved wolf pressed against his chest, familiar, grounding. He imagined it soaked in the sound of rain too, dreaming beside him. Everything dreamed out here, even the boat, even the sea. A gull cried once in the distance, then was gone. The sail overhead flapped gently, not with wind, but with the weight of water. Drops slid from its edges, pattering onto the deck in tiny rivers. They flowed between the planks, found their way to the ship's lowest parts, and gathered there for a time before being scooped or drained. Rainwater was valuable. In the morning, they'd collect it from the tarps, drinking what was clean, saving what was left. Sea water couldn't be drunk, of course, and though they carried barrels of fresh water, every drop mattered. A rain like this was a gift, a gentle one, a gift that let them sleep, even as it sustained them. The thought made Eirik smile, just faintly. He drifted deeper, and the ship rocked, and the rain fell. There were no dreams tonight, not for him. Just the hum of the water, the echo of droplets, the occasional roll of the ship beneath him. It was enough. Sometimes rest came not through visions, but through quiet, through stillness, through listening without seeking meaning. The night wore on. Above the rain clouds, stars waited. Beneath them, the Longship floated, held in the arms of sky and sea, and all aboard slept. Far in the north, the night skies come alive, not with thunder, not with fire, but with something softer, something stranger. Curtains of color fold and ripple across the sky like banners of ancient gods, green and violet and gold, dancing in silence. The Northern Lights, some call them. To the Vikings, they were the Bifrost Bridge, the path to Asgard, where the gods walked. And on this night, they shimmered over the Longship like a whispered promise. The rain was gone. The sea had calmed, stretched out in long glassy sheets beneath the ship, reflecting the moving light in subtle waves of color. The sails were dry again, fluttering lazily in a low wind that seemed to carry the scent of snow, though there was none yet. The clouds had parted during the late hours, and now the heavens were clear and vast. Eirik stood for a moment at the ship's edge, wrapped in his cloak, watching the sky unfold. He wasn't the only one awake. Near the middle of the ship, Leif had also stirred, eyes wide, gazing upward in silent wonder. Even Gunnar, who had seen the aurora 100 times before, had lifted his eyes. No one spoke. There were no words needed. Some moments speak for themselves. The lights moved gently, like breath, and beneath them, the ship swayed just as softly. Eventually, Eirik lay back down, pulling his cloak close, tucking his carved wolf beneath his neck like a pillow. The lights still swam overhead, visible even with closed eyes, their color pressing through the lids like a dream that refused to fade. It was peaceful, almost holy. Sleep returned, slow and deep, and with it came dreams. Eirik dreamed he was walking through snow, but the snow did not crunch beneath his feet. Instead, it hummed. Each step sent a ripple of light outward. He followed a trail of runes etched in ice, glowing faintly, winding across a frozen sea. At the horizon, he saw a shape tall, golden shining. He walked toward it for what felt like hours, never cold, never tired. In the dream, he was not alone. Behind him walked others' crew, his kin, faces calm, eyes steady. No one spoke. They simply followed, the sound of their footfalls singing together like music made of frost and light. And overhead, the aurora danced. He woke some time later with the echo of that music still in his mind. He did not move. Around him, the ship was still. Men lay wrapped in their cloaks, unmoving. The hearth had long gone cold, its last embers asleep in their own way. Above, the lights had begun to fade, turning from green to pale silver, and then to gray. Morning was not yet near, but the edge of night was beginning to soften. The dreams still lingered. Leif stirred beside him, not fully waking, just adjusting his position. The younger boy whispered something in his sleep, something about following stars. Eirik smiled. Maybe they'd shared a dream. It happened sometimes. Or maybe the sky had simply spoken to them both. Not all dreams were fantasy. Some were memory, some were hope, some were reminders. But whatever shape they took, dreams were sacred here. They came more freely on the sea, more vivid, more strange. Some said it was the motion of the ship that stirred them. Others claimed the gods sent visions to those who dared sleep so far from land. Eirik didn't know the truth. He only knew that each night on the ship felt like a step into another world. And tonight had been one of the clearest steps yet. He thought of his village then, of how, when the northern lights came, children would run to the fields to watch them, shouting and pointing, laughing in the cold. Mothers would gather cloaks and pull them tighter around small shoulders. Fathers would lift their little ones onto their backs for a better view. The elders would watch in silence, some smiling, some weeping, none saying why. The lights were more than just beauty. They were memory. They were connection. And now they had followed Eirik to the sea. He reached a hand up, fingers splayed against the sky. Of course, he could not touch it, but the motion was enough. It was a way of saying thank you, a way of reaching back. The deck beneath him was dry again, warm from the wood's slow retention of sunlight earlier in the day. The ship creaked softly as it swayed. Ropes shifted against the mast with quiet familiarity. A gull called once in the distance, then fell silent again. Eirik closed his eyes once more. Sleep took him again, not like a sudden pull, but like a deepening breath. The Longship drifted forward through a sea so calm it barely made a sound. The wind was light but steady, just enough to keep the sail filled. And the sky, even as the lights dimmed, remained open and vast. This night would be remembered, not for what was said or done, but for what was felt, for the dreams shared and unspoken, for the way the sea and the sky seemed to become the same thing, soft and glowing and full of wonder. Men stirred occasionally, adjusting positions, pulling cloaks tighter, sighing into sleep. A few whispered prayers before slipping into stillness again. There was no schedule now, no need for watches. The world itself had decided to keep them safe this night. Eirik felt that deeply. And so, as the Longship continued through the night, carried by gentle wind and softer dreams, he slept without fear. And above them, just barely, the aurora danced its final steps before dawn. The morning never truly came. Instead, the sea wore a thick blanket of fog, soft and white, that dulled the light of day and silenced even the waves. The horizon disappeared. The sky and water blurred into one colorless veil. It was as if the Longship had slipped into another world, one without distance, one without direction, one made entirely of quiet. The fog wrapped the ship in stillness. And inside that stillness, the crew moved slowly. No one shouted. No one rushed. Voices were hushed. Boots padded lightly on the wooden deck, and even the ropes made less sound as they were adjusted. The sea, too, was quiet. It didn't lap or slap against the hull. It just breathed. Eirik woke with the fog already settled. At first, he thought he was still dreaming. The pale light made the world soft and undefined, and the cold clung to his skin like morning mist clings to a stone wall. He blinked several times before lifting his head. All around him, shapes were moving, his crewmates rising from sleep, stretching, sitting up, but they moved like shadows behind a curtain. It was beautiful in a way, like being inside a memory. The kind of memory that doesn't have sharp lines or loud sounds. Just feelings, just presence. He sat up slowly, cloak pulled tightly around him. The carved wolf figure was still beneath him, pressed against his chest like a heartbeat. He held it now, not for protection, but for grounding. It helped him remember where he was, who he was, because the fog had a strange power. It made the world feel less solid, less real. It erased the edges of things, people, time, place. And in that blankness, thoughts wandered freely. Past and present mingled. Dreams lingered long into the day. Bjorn moved nearby, his broad frame emerging from the fog like a ghost, then vanishing again as he walked toward the prow. A soft grunt, a faint sigh of rope being adjusted, then silence once more. Gunnar sat not far from Eirik, sharpening a knife even though there was nothing to cut. It was a habit, more than a task. The sound of the whetstone was the only sharp sound in this world of fog, and even that was strangely soft. Leif hadn't woken yet. He lay curled in his cloak, face peaceful, one hand resting palm up beside his cheek. He looked younger than he was, almost like the boy he'd been before the sea. Sleep had smoothed his forehead, made his lips twitch with silent dreams. Eirik smiled. He didn't wake him. There was no need. In the fog, time didn't press forward. It floated. Some men dozed again, even after waking. Others wrapped themselves tighter, not against the cold, but against the vagueness of the day. They whispered to each other sometimes, fragments of stories, bits of song, a question or two, asked and answered, but no one raised their voice. It didn't feel right to break the spell. Fog had a way of drawing the soul inward. Eirik leaned back against the wooden hull, letting his eyes half close. He wasn't sleeping now, but not quite awake either. His mind wandered back to his childhood, to mornings in the woods when the mist clung to the grass and the leaves were heavy with dew. He remembered the feeling of stepping into the forest with a blanket around his shoulders, barefoot and quiet, listening to birds he couldn't see. That memory lived in his body still. He breathed slowly now, letting the damp air fill his lungs. The smell of salt and wood and old smoke lingered around him, familiar and grounding. The ship creaked gently beneath him, and he could feel the weight of other men nearby, even if he couldn't see them. He liked this part of the journey. Not the destination, not the action. Just the middle space, the floating, the resting. And in that quiet, dreams returned. Not the vivid dreams of gods or glowing skies, but smaller ones, simpler ones. He dreamed of his father's hands, weathered and strong, fixing a broken net, of his sister humming while stirring soup, of lying in grass that was still warm from the sun, watching clouds move lazily above the fields. These were not grand dreams, but they were powerful. They reminded him of who he had been before he became who he was. Others dreamed too. Some spoke softly in their sleep, names and words whispered like prayers. Some breathed deeply, their faces slack and calm, lost in whatever world had opened beneath the fog. Even Gunnar, the oldest among them, had his head tilted back and eyes closed now, a soft rise and fall in his chest. Sleep here came not just at night. The fog brought its own kind of night, its own invitation to rest. Eirik closed his eyes again, not to dream, not to escape, just to be still. The Longship didn't hurry. It had no need. The fog would lift when it was ready, and the wind would return in its time. For now, the sea held them in place gently, like a cradle. No danger, no need for watch, no destination pressing at their backs. Just now, just breath, just the fog. The men lay down again, in small groups, in spaces they'd shaped into homes. Some used oars as support beams for their tents. Others stretched out on bare deck, trusting the sky not to rain, trusting the sea not to wake them. Eirik turned on his side, one arm beneath his head. He listened to the world around him. The creak of rope, the sigh of a sleeping man, the heartbeat of the ocean, slow and patient. The fog wrapped the ship like a dream, and the Longship floated, neither here nor there, just gently held in the arms of time. The fog had finally lifted by the time evening, returned again dot in its place, came a stillness of a different kind, not blank, not vague like the mist, but heavy and golden. The sky had turned soft amber as the sun slipped low, its last light spreading. Over the sea like warm honey, the clouds, wispy and distant, glowed gently in shades of rose and gold. The air had a quiet coolness, crisp but not cold, clean like air after a storm. The Longship drifted easily, its sail catching the mild breeze, its hull gliding with barely a ripple. The horizon stretched in every direction, no land in sight, only sea and sky and the ship between them. This was a night for fire. Small though it was, the hearth at the ship's center was alive again. A careful flame, coaxed from kindling in old embers, glowed inside the iron pot, its orange light licking upward in lazy spirals. Around it, the men gathered not for warmth this time, but for comfort. The fire didn't need to be large. It only needed to be steady. Eirik sat near the edge of the circle, legs crossed beneath him, hands cupped around a warm bowl of broth. It tasted of dried fish and herbs, simple but soothing. The heat seeped into his fingers, into his chest, spreading. Slowly. He wasn't cold, but the warmth felt like home. Across from him, Leif spoke softly with Bjorn, asking about wood types and carving. The boy had taken to shaping bits of spare driftwood into small figures, hammers, fish. Bjorn, always patient, gave quiet tips, pointing with thick fingers, his voice low and slow. Eirik smiled to himself. The boy had come a long way from the seasick, wide-eyed boy who had first stepped aboard. The firelight flickered across their faces, painting them in gold dot to Eirik's left. Gunnar leaned back with his eyes closed, humming something old and slow, a melody with no words. One passed down from mouth to mouth, memory to memory. The others didn't speak over it. They let the song carry itself, soft and steady, threading through the night like smoke dot. It was the kind of tune meant for sleeping, not because it lulled, but because it reminded of mothers and longhouses, of dark winters and wool blankets, of being small and safe and cared for. Even warriors needed that sometimes. Even seafarers with calloused hands and strong arms carried with them the soft parts of life. When Gunnar stopped humming, the silence that followed felt sacred. One by one, the crew began to shift into their sleeping spaces. They didn't rush. They never did. Sleep on the ship was not a thing to chase. It was a thing to welcome. Like fog, like dreams, like the tide. You made your space. You wrapped your cloak around your shoulders. You pulled your memories close. And you waited for the sea to carry you. Eirik stayed near the fire a little longer. He poked at the embers with a small stick, watching sparks rise and fall like tiny stars. His mind wandered, not to battles or fears or unknown shores, but to moments. The smell of his mother's hair when she hugged him, the rough feel of his father's wool tunic, the way the wind blew through the trees behind their house in autumn. Small things, beautiful things, things that returned only in stillness. He whispered a word to the fire. He didn't know why. It wasn't a prayer, just a name, someone he missed. The fire crackled in answer, and he smiled. Then he stood, poured the rest of his broth over the edge of the ship, and turned toward his bedroll. His sleeping place was simple. A section of deck he'd softened with a layer of straw and old wool. A folded cloak beneath his head. His carved wolf tucked nearby, always. The stars had begun to return overhead, scattered like ice across dark velvet. The moon was only a sliver now, thin and low, just enough to shine without stealing the sky. He lay down slowly, pulling his cloak over him. All around, the others were settling too. Some whispered, some snored already. Some lay with eyes open, staring upward as if the stars might speak. A few of the younger men still poked at the fire, but even they were slowing, their laughter quieter, their shoulders slumping. Eirik turned onto his side, listening. The sea was gentle tonight. Just enough motion to rock the ship, just enough. Sound to soothe. The ropes creaked softly. The sail rustled. The water lapped, all familiar, all part of the ship's song. And then faint, from somewhere he could not place, came a voice. A woman's voice, distant and clear, singing in a language older than his own. He didn't open his eyes. He didn't need to. He had heard this song in dreams before, or perhaps in stories. Or perhaps it was the sea itself, remembering the lullabies sung on its shores for 1,000 years. The melody moved through the air like mist, touching each man, each plank, each breath. The others heard it too. No one said a word. No one had to. It was not a frightening thing. It was beautiful, familiar, like something once known, now remembered. It wasn't loud, wasn't urgent. Just a thread of sound that wove through the night like a blanket. Eirik's breathing slowed. The carved wolf was warm in his hand. His heartbeat was steady. And slowly, as the Longship rocked beneath him, as the fire dimmed and the stars looked down, sleep came. It came like the song soft, sure, and steady Dot, and all around him, others followed. The ship floated on. The song faded, but its echo lingered. Dot, and every soul aboard drifted into the kind of sleep only the sea could give. The sea had not moved in hours. Dot, no wind, no waves, just an endless flat mirror stretching to the horizon in every direction. It was not the quiet of nightfall or fog. It was something deeper, a stillness that felt ancient. The Longship floated. In it, like a leaf on a pond, unmoving, yet suspended by something unseen, as if held gently in place by the hand of a forgotten god. The air was warm, not the kind of warmth that scorches, but the slow, soft warmth of late summer air that presses gently against the skin, heavy with silence, humming with invisible life. It was the kind of stillness that slowed everything: thought, breath, movement, even time itself. The crew felt it. They did not row. There was no need. They did not speak much. There was nothing to say. They rested. They watched. They dreamed. While awake, Eirik lay on his back beneath the bare sky, his cloak folded beneath his head. He had not closed his eyes for a long time, but he was not tired. Not in the usual way. His body was still, his muscles relaxed, but his mind wandered far, drifting, not in words or pictures, but in feelings, in memory, in presence. The stars above had not returned yet. The sky held a soft gold from the sun's departure, fading, slowly to lavender, then to blue. The colors were muted, like paint washed in sea water. There were no sharp edges anymore, no past, no future. Just this moment. The Longship had become something else in the stillness. Not a vessel, not a tool, but a place between places, a floating hall, a cradle of breath and bone and wood, rocked not by waves, but by the slow turning of the world itself. Eirik could feel it. Every part of the ship seemed to listen to the air, to the quiet, to the soft creaks in the wood. Even the sail hung loose, as if resting, as if sighing. There was no tension in the ropes, no pull on the mast, just stillness. And the men, too, had given in. Some lay in their beds, their cloaks open to the sky, their faces turned upward. Some sat cross-legged, staring out over the sea without speaking, not watching for land or weather, but simply watching. Some leaned against the rails, heads tilted, eyes soft. The usual restlessness had faded. No one asked what came next. No one spoke of where they were, because here, in this still sea, it didn't matter. Eirik listened to his own breath, slow and even. He placed the carved wolf figure gently beside him, its worn wood cool to the touch. It had been his companion through storms, through cold, through nights of fire and nights of fog. But tonight, even that little figure seemed more than just a carving. It felt full of meaning, though he couldn't say what the meaning was. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to feel more deeply. And in the silence, memories drifted. Not sharp memories, but soft ones. The sound of fire crackling in. The longhouse back home. The rhythm of weaving as his mother worked at the loom. The way the wind bent tall grasses beside the fjord in the hour before dusk. A game played as a child. A smile seen from across a field. A name whispered once and then forgotten. They came and went, one after another, like waves that never reached the shore. Somewhere in the stillness, someone began to hum God. It wasn't Gunnar this time. It was someone younger, perhaps Leif, though Eirik couldn't be sure. The voice was soft and uncertain at first, just a thread of tone, but it did not stop. It wandered up and down like a feather, caught on a breeze until others began to join. Not words, not a song, just sound. A sound made of breath and memory and presence. A lullaby with no beginning and no end. And in that sound, something in the air changed. The sea shimmered, just faintly. Not with movement, but with feeling. Eirik opened his eyes above him. The stars had begun to appear, one by one, timid at first, then bolder. Their light was steady, clear, soft. The sky had deepened to velvet again, and the world had taken on the look of something remembered from a dream. The Longship did not move, and yet Eirik felt himself drifting not across the sea, but deeper, into calm, into a space where the body disappears, where time dissolves, where only breath and light remain. He was not alone. He knew without looking that. Every man on board felt the same. They were not asleep. Not quite. They were something else. Suspended. Held. Together. And, for a time, no one knew how long they simply stayed there. Not trying, not thinking, not needing, just floating. And when sleep finally came, it did not fall like a curtain or descend. Like a weight. It unfolded. It bloomed. It embraced. And every man aboard that ship gave in without resistance. The sea stayed still. The stars watched, and the Longship floated quietly in the space, between waking and dreaming, between sky and water, between what had been and what was still to come. Morning returned without urgency. The sky grew lighter, not with speed but with softness, a pale wash of color brushing the edges of the world. First, a quiet blue, then silver, then a gold too gentle to disturb. The Longship stirred slowly, as if reluctant to leave the deep calm of night. The stillness that had wrapped the crew, like a blanket through the night, remained, but it had changed into something warmer, something more present. Sleep had been deep, shared, and sacred. And now, waking came with the same gentleness, the same breath-like rhythm. Eirik blinked his eyes open. The first thing he saw was the sky above him. Clear, cloudless, open. The stars had vanished, their watch complete. The air was cool but dry, and he could smell the faintest hint of pine, faint on the breeze. He sat up slowly, cloak sliding from his shoulders. All around him, the others were doing the same. Bjorn yawned and stretched, joints cracking like old branches. Leif rubbed his eyes, then leaned over to check on the tiny carving he had been working on the day before. Gunnar was already awake, seated with his legs folded, sharpening a blade he might not use that day, or the next. There was no rush. No one spoke of land. No one pointed to the horizon. They had slept, truly slept. The kind of sleep that doesn't just rest the body, but settles the soul. And in that quiet morning, none of them were ready to let go of it. The sea had begun to move again, barely, just enough to remind them it was there, alive beneath the hull. The Longship responded, shifting, slightly, creaking like a wooden door opening to the world once more. It was a familiar sound, a welcome one. Eirik looked down at the carved wolf, now resting near his foot. He picked it up, rubbed his thumb across the smooth back. He smiled. The little figure had been with him through the journey, through the fog, the rain, the silence, the dreams. And now it would go with him to the next place, wherever that might be. Breakfast was quiet. A bit of dried meat passed around, pieces of bread, a little water. But even eating felt part of the same rhythm. No sudden words, no jostling. Just a shared sense of continuation, as though the sleep had not truly ended. It had simply opened its eyes. At some point, Gunnar spoke, not loudly, not to everyone, just a simple observation, said aloud as he watched. A bird pass overhead. Land's coming, he said. You can feel it. And indeed, they could. Not see it, not hear it, but feel it. A shift in the wind, a slight difference in the air, the kind of knowledge that doesn't come from maps or stars, but from the body. From living close to the world long enough to know when it's changing. But no one rushed to stand. No one began packing or preparing. The shore would come. But there was still this, this moment, this gentle, drift. This quiet. Eirik lay back again, just for a little while, his eyes half open, watching the mast rise into the sky. A gull wheeled above. The sail fluttered. The ropes creaked. The breath of the ship moved with his own. And he thought about all the ways the sea had taught them to sleep, not by force. Not through comfort, but through surrender, through rhythm, through trust. Sleep on the ship was not a thing taken. It was a thing allowed. It asked only one thing in return: that you listen. That you listen to the sea, to the wind, to your own body. That you let the world carry you, for a while. That you understand rest is not weakness, but wisdom. And now, after many nights, many dreams, many moments between waves and starlight, they were ready to return to land, not because they were done sleeping, but because they had learned how to. Carry that sleep with them. In their bones, in their breath, in the quiet they now knew how to find, even on solid ground. The Longship rocked gently as the wind picked up. A distant line appeared on the horizon, a hint of green, a suggestion of trees, a shore, and the men stood, slowly stretching, gathering their cloaks and figures and memories. Eirik slipped the carved wolf into the pouch at his belt. He stood tall, the sea behind him, the land ahead. He did not speak. He did not need to. All understood. The journey was not just over water. It was through silence. Through dreams, through sleep. And now they would bring that calm with them, wherever they went.